Hi, I just wanted to do one more example featuring domain and range of square root functions. And this time we'll figure it out algebraically and then we'll confirm by drawing the graph afterwards. So let's look for the domain of this function. And the domain of any function is found by limiting what values of x you're allowed to use. So for square root functions, that basically comes down to the fact that the piece under the square root sign, which in this case is x minus 4, cannot be negative. Okay, you can't get the square root of a negative number. So in other words, you're saying that x minus 4, the piece that's under the square root function here, has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, can't be negative. Can't be negative is the same as greater than or equal to 0. Now you want to get x on its own. So x is going to be bigger than or equal to, if you move the negative 4 across, it becomes 4. So x is bigger than or equal to 4. Another way of saying that, and the way that we usually say it in these cases, is x can be anything from 4 up to infinity. And as we talked about in the last example, since x can be equal to 4, we use a square root, we use a square bracket. Infinity isn't actually a number, so we use parentheses for that. Now the range maybe is a little bit harder. People maybe find it a little bit harder. And the range is what are the type of answers that you can get? What sort of answers can you get? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the limits that are going to be placed on f of x. Well, you start here by looking at the square root part of it. Okay, so just look at the square root part of it. Okay, and we know that any square root is going to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so for the domain, we just took the expression under the square root sign. We didn't include the square root itself. For the range, we're including the square root itself. And we know that the square root also has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay? Square root cannot be negative. Okay, so we know that the square root has to be greater than or equal to 0. We want to figure out what f of x has to be. Now, we've got the square root of x minus 4. How do we turn that into f of x? What's missing? Okay, well, f of x is the square root of x minus 4 plus 3, and we have the square root part of it, so let's add on plus 3 to both sides. Okay, because if we do that, if we add on plus 3 to both sides, okay, you can see that here on the left we now have f of x, and that's what we wanted to get. We wanted to see what were the limitations on f of x. And by adding on the plus 3 to the square root, we've got f of x. So this thing here actually is f of x. Okay, so we're saying f of x is greater than or equal to 0 plus 3. 0 plus 3 is just 3. So f of x is greater than or equal to 3. In other words, f of x can start at 3 and can get bigger, as big as it likes. Okay, so the domain is going to be from 4 to the square root of, from 4 to infinity, and the range is going to be from 3 to infinity. So let me see if we can pull this over now. Bear with me one little second, and I'm going to bring this in. I'm sorry, I should have had this prepared in advance. The clipboard, and we'll pull it in here. Okay, and hopefully this appears in the right place. And there we go. Okay, so this is the graph. I'd drawn it earlier. This is f of x equal to the square root of x minus 4 plus 3. And remember, domain is, where does it start on the left? So the domain, it starts here. That's its starting point. So, and then it keeps going over to the left. So the domain is from, that's 4. Let me blow that up for you a little bit. So that's 4. So the domain is from 4 to infinity. And then the range, if we look at the range, where does it start on the way up? It starts here at 3, and then it just keeps going up. Okay, it keeps climbing higher and higher. It's also going to the left, but it keeps climbing higher and higher. So it's going upwards. Okay, so it starts at 3. This is the range. Is from 3, and it's just going to keep getting higher and higher to infinity. This was the domain. Okay, and that's in agreement with what we had earlier. If this reacts for me, you see the domain was 4 to infinity, the range was 3 to infinity. Okay, hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer.